Jordan, what do you see as the greatest risks that social media poses to society at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are a lot of risks and issues that we've seen. But if I had to call out specific ones, I'd focus on two. So, firstly, the largest tech platforms are monopolists. And so that's not good for the economy. We know that it discourages innovation, it limits consumer choice, and really it creates an imbalance in the market. So, there's currently an antitrust lawsuit against Google in Texas. And one of the former employees described Google's position and tried to compare it to the financial industry. And their comment was Google at the moment is like as if Goldman Sachs or Citibank owned the entire New York Stock Exchange, right? So they control both the supply and the demand side and plenty others in between. So, clearly that's not a very healthy and competitive marketplace. So that's probably the first issue I'd call out. And the second one is really that at a societal level, social platforms in particular are creating this sort of alternate reality where we stop having a shared experience. And that's because we know that algorithms are all about hyper personalization and just showing you the kind of content that you want. And that's really kind of dividing us. And so if we stop having a shared view of the world and we stop mixing with people with a different opinion from ourselves, then we stop having the ability to cooperate, and it's really destabilizing for society. So that I think that's a big sort of more macro issue that's happening right now.
So, Jordan, governments, tech companies, or users, who do you believe has the responsibility to address these risks and why?
I think we all have a part to play. So, as individuals, for example, there's a lot to be said about having a bit of media literacy and getting a sense of what's credible information versus what's not credible information. So, for instance, it's pretty easy to listen to a TikTok financial influencer, for example, because you can package up financial advice in a really engaging way. But it's probably also good to realize that some of those people aren't necessarily qualified or they don't have the right license. So we need to balance that sort of engaging content for credible and qualified content. Governments are a pretty good line of defense in terms of regulating online platforms. And there's a lot of momentum happening in government regulation for technology right now. So that's really good and really encouraging to see. And that's happening in Australia and globally as well. But I think that ultimately the bulk of the responsibility should fall to the digital and social platforms themselves, because they're the ones that are actually hosting the content that we are all consuming. And they're the ones that are profiting from it, right? So that Google and Facebook are both trillion-dollar companies. They've got a lot of resources. So it should be their responsibility to make sure that the content on their platforms are as safe and as accurate as possible, because they're the ones who are getting the most benefit from that engagement from people.
Certainly. So, what is your own proposed strategy for the social media platforms to implement this regulation, especially given it's not really in their interest to do so?
Yes. Yeah. So from a financial industry perspective, one of the proposals we put forward is having regulation parity between social media or influencer advertising and mainstream advertising. So at a minimum, financial influencers or any financial players who want to engage online should be subject to the same rules as everybody else. Right? It doesn't really make sense that there's an exemption that hasn't been explained. And another proposal is for regulators to really consider the online space and properly investigate the impacts that it's having. And then finally, if you want to provide financial advice online, you should really have an ASIC approved license, because it's, the rules are pretty clear that if you want to provide proper financial advice, you need to be qualified and licensed to do so. So that's a pretty easy rule, I think, to implement.